Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's Torah study. I am Hakham Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov, and we have a good Torah study for you. We're going to be continuing what we've been doing before. We're working our way through the book of Zechariah. We're kind of getting there. We're close to the end. We're in chapter 10. It has 14 chapters. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, including chapter 10, 5 chapters to go. And then we'll continue moving through the Tanakh. We're going to continue in Leviticus chapter 25. We'll see how far we get in that. And we're going to, I was going to do some biblical archaeology, but I think I'm going to save it for next week because it is getting a little bit late here, even though it's really fascinating stuff. Maybe we'll do it in between the Tanakh and, in between Zechariah and Leviticus. We'll see. But I do want to dig in. That's why I kind of cut the music short, because we got a lot to cover. Well, I'll tell you some interesting things. I got my first death threat. This happens from time to time. You know, this ain't my first rodeo. I've been doing this Karaite thing for a while. And someone here in the community said, and I quote, well, if I could get away with it, I would kill Melech because he rejects the oral law. So I don't usually take these things very seriously. I know exactly who the person is, and he ain't killing me. Let's put it that way. But it just does go to show that actually, when you reject the cult of rabbinical Judaism, you really can open up some people who are deeply committed to the cult, and these are usually people who are, how can I say, they're very arrogant. This is the pattern I've noticed. They're very arrogant. They are very kind of full of themselves, almost narcissistic, and they're very frustrated in life, and therefore kind of have a tendency towards controlling others and even towards potentially using violence, or at least threatening to use violence. That's the pattern I've seen over the years, because this is not the first time this has happened to me. This has happened a number of times over the years. But this is the first time it's happened to me here in the place that I live in the Golan Heights. Now I'm part of I go to a synagogue, a rabbinical synagogue, on a regular basis, and they're very, very open, very welcoming. I have a lot of friends there. They're just amazing people. But there's always going to be haters, and I have gotten some pushback, or shall we say some negative reactions from a very, very small kind of minority. But those who are, stuck in that rabbinical cult. One was very nice about it. I wouldn't say nice, but he wasn't, he expressed his displeasure at my points of view, but he didn't threaten any kind of violence or anything. But then this other particular person did actually threaten violence and said, once again, and I didn't hear this directly, I heard this from hearsay from my cousin. I have a cousin who lives here also in the Golan Heights. and in the same city that I do, and a very close friend of mine who relayed the message to me that this particular person, who shall remain nameless, did say basically that if he could get away with killing Melech, then he would, because he's a Karaite. He rejects the oral law. I did a video not too long ago. If you look on either the World Alliance of Qara'im channel or the Karaite Insights channel, the YouTube channel, I did a video, posted it probably last week, I'm guessing, but I visited the place a couple of weeks ago. It was the grave of the Rambam. The Rambam is the famous rabbi from the 1100s who was born in Cordoba, Spain. His family eventually moved to Fez, Morocco, and then they eventually settled in Cairo, what it was then called at the time, and I think parts of it is still called Fustat. And he said in his Mishnah Torah, the chapter on Minim, which means the chapter on heretics, or the section on heretics, I believe it's chapter 3, and it's laws 1 and 2. He basically said, I'm paraphrasing, that if you can get away with killing a Karaite, you're allowed to do so. You can walk up to a Karaite and just kill him. And he said some other lovely things. Eventually, he ended up, as I mentioned, the Rambam ended up in Fustat in Cairo, and they had to flee Cordoba, Spain, and they wandered around for a while, and eventually he ended up in, as I said, Cairo, Fustat, and it turns out that was one of the major centers of Karaites, of Karaite Judaism, of Karaitism, and he had to contend with a Jewish population, about 40% of which was Karaite. So then, he wasn't so keen on saying that they should be killed at that point. So he kind of modified his views a little bit. So like any other person in life, they'll change their views, they'll modify their views. But that is recorded in his Mishnah Torah, and if you want, you can go check out the video in either the World Alliance of Qara'im or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel. Anyway, it just goes to show how sick these rabbinical Jews who are really indoctrinated into the cult are. It's very similar to, I have a very close friend who always says that the New Testament is to the Christians as the Quran, or as Muhammad is, I'm sorry, he says it a little bit different. He says Jesus is to the Christians as Muhammad is to the Muslims, as the Talmud is to rabbinical Jews. In other words, if you go to a Muslim country and you start insulting Muhammad, you're gonna open up the possibility of violence being used against you. We all know that. And if you start insulting Jesus, well, I don't think anymore that the Christians will use violence against you. But back in the day, in the good old days, when Christianity had a lot more power, had a lot more political power throughout Europe, then that certainly could result in that. And it just goes to show that even among rabbinical Jews, they're so set into their cult, into their sick cult of rabbinical Judaism, to their sick cult of Talmudism, that if you threaten their their dedication to this cult, then they can react violently, or at least threaten to react violently. At any rate, so that's that. That being said, other than that, everything's going very well here. We continue to have regular Karaite meetings, World Alliance of Qara'im meetings here where I live, and the community is slowly but surely expanding, and we have a lot of plans for the future, as I've mentioned many times. So that's my short but to the point kind of rant. Let's see if I can open up the windows here a little bit. And so we're going to dig right in. 1 second, please. Fresh air in here, and we're going to dig right in. We're going to go into the book of Zechariah. So let me put on music for 2 seconds. We'll bring that up, and then we will be right back.
ילדי הטוב והנאה, אל תירא ואל תפחד. My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. I pray.
Okay, we're back. Welcome back. Once again, this is Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And we're going to dig in now to the book of Zechariah. Hope everybody can hear me. Okay. All right, sweet. Thank you so much. And I may have to call Tsuri out to Israel to take care of this guy that's been threatening me. I remember Tsuri once said, if I ever have any problems like that, then he's gonna help me take care of business. All right, sorry, we'll talk about it. No, it's joking. It's fine. Okay. Anyway, so let's dig into Zechariah. So let me share the screen here. And we're gonna start in chapter 10, but as I usually do, just again to get the context and by way of review, we'll just read very quickly in English. We're gonna read through Zechariah chapter 9, which is what we learned last week. Okay, so let's see. Hope everybody can see the screen. I think everybody can. I think we're good. Let's see if this makes it a little bit better. Oh, that actually, let's play around with this for 1 second here. It shows me. I think this makes it better to see. You can see me. See me. What's important is to see the text. All right, so we're going through Zechariah chapter 9. And it says, the word of Yahweh is against the land of Hadrach, and will come to rest on Damascus. Damascus, of course, in modern day Syria. And I think we learned last week that so is Hadrach. That's the same general area. The eyes of the people and all the tribes of Israel are on Yahweh. And on Hamath, too, which borders on it. And on Tyre and Sidon, though they are very skillful. So the word of Yahweh is against these various areas / cities, right? Damascus, Hadrach, and Syria. Hamath, also in the same general area. We spoke a lot about Tyre and Sidon. These are the Phoenician cities in modern day Lebanon, on the coast of Lebanon. There are 3 Phoenician cities. There were a bunch of Phoenician cities, but the 3 main ones that in ancient times, during these times, would have been Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. In Hebrew, Tzur, Sidon, and Gval. And so this is talking about the Phoenicians, who, in general, at least during the time of David and Solomon, were on very good terms with David and Solomon. I think we spoke about last week, and it says so explicitly in the first book of Kings, and again in the second book of Chronicles, that the wood for the temple, for the first temple, Solomon's temple, quote unquote, was brought down by the king of, or was shipped down by the king of Tyre, named Hiram, shipped down to the port of Jaffa, which is just south of Tel Aviv. You can visit old Jaffa to this day, and then was brought up from there to Jerusalem, where it was used in the building of the first temple. But at any rate, so these are the Phoenician cities. These are the cities or the areas around Damascus. Tyre's built herself a stronghold. She's heaped up silver like dust and gold like dirts in the streets. So Tyre was a very wealthy city back in the day. They were known for their production of what's called Tyrian purple. There's a whole big story behind that. I'm not going to get into it, but it has to do also with why the rabbis later chose this particular sea creature, essentially sea snail, called the Hexaplex trunculus is a scientific name, to be what they claim is the only source of tchelet, of the light blue that you're supposed to wear on your tzitzit, on the corners of your garment. But that's a long story. We're not going to get into it right now. I could give a whole 3-hour talk about that. Very fascinating stuff. Okay, but Yahweh will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea, and she will be consumed by fire. Again, speaking about Tyre, Tzur, the Phoenician city in Lebanon. You guys can all hear me. Just check in. Everybody can hear okay and see okay? I'm going to assume so. Okay, Ashkelon, we'll see it in fear. Now we're moving down to the south. Okay, and let's even show, no, this is not the chapter we're dealing with this week. So Ashkelon, these are now the Philistine cities. These are now south of the Israelite territory. Okay, Philistine cities, you'll recognize some of these names. So Ashkelon is a modern city, or there's a modern city named Ashkelon. Hold on one second, please. There's a modern city of Ashkelon on the southern coast of Israel to this day. Gaza, you've all heard of that. Ekron, these are all Philistine cities. There are 5 Philistine cities. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, and Gat. Gat, you may have heard, is probably most famous. This is the city where Goliath came from. So Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. So these are now prophecies. So first we have here prophecies against the cities around Damascus, prophecies against the Phoenician cities to the north. And now we have prophecies against the Philistine cities to the south. Okay, I will bring up a quick map just to visualize that, since a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's see, map of ancient Israel. Let's see what we got. Is that going to do it? I think that might be the one we used last week. Ancient Israel and Judah. Let's give it a second here. Oh, I guess there's noise coming in the window. See if that helps. Okay, so here is the ancient kingdom of Israel. Here, and this is more or less where the border is today. Okay, so this is Akko. So more or less where the border is today. There's Tyre. These are the Phoenician cities. There's Sidon. And we can't see on the map, but farther up along the coast would also be Byblos, Jebal. Out here is going to be, let's see, Damascus is right over here. Okay, and then we go down to the south. Then we're going to get to the Philistine cities. Here's Jaffa, right, which we mentioned. Okay, Jaffa is where the wood, so modern day Tel Aviv is going to be right around here. You guys can see me moving the cursor, I think so. Jaffa is right below us. Right below it, this is where the wood, sorry, I got to turn on the fan again. Oh, the window. So that's where the wood was brought down. The wood was chopped down in the forests of Lebanon. You've heard of all of the cedar of Lebanon. So cedars were chopped down in Lebanon and then sent by boat or by raft down to Jaffa and then brought up to Jerusalem, which is right here. There's Jerusalem right there. Okay, to build the first temple. And Jaffa is also the place when Jonah was called by Yahweh to prophesy against Nineveh, which is, I bet nobody knows where modern day Nineveh is. Nineveh has been found, it's been excavated. Does anybody know where it's located? Don't Google it. Anyone want to take a guess where they've excavated the ancient city of Nineveh, that same Nineveh, which was the head of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and which Jonah was called to prophesy against? It is in, believe it or not, Mosul, Iraq. And you could visit it to this day. You could see the ruins of Nineveh in Mosul, Iraq. Northern Iraq, that's the Kurdish territory of Iraq in the north. It's actually pretty safe there. Okay, so Jonah was called to prophesy, to go north, or to go, I should say, northeast to Iraq, and instead he ran away. And where did he go? He went to Jaffa, either right as Joppa or Joppa, and he caught a boat out into the sea. He was eventually tossed overboard. We'll eventually get to the book of Jonah, one of my favorite books. They're all my favorite books, but Jonah is a great book. Of course, went down when he was tossed overboard. He went down to the bottom of the sea and was, as it says in the book of Jonah, swallowed by the whale, where he lived in its stomach for 3 days. You guys all know the story. Okay, any rate, so these are all the Philistine cities in the south. A mongrel people will occupy Ashdod, and I will put an end to the pride of the Philistines. So we have prophecy against the area of Damascus. We have prophecy against the Phoenician cities of the coast of Lebanon. And we have prophecy against, Zechariah is prophesying against the Philistine cities in the south. I'll take blood from their mouths and the forbidden food from between their teeth, implying that they eat blood, which human beings are not supposed to be eating, and that they eat forbidden, disgusting foods like pig, shrimp, etc., which they're not supposed to be eating. Those who are left, which no human beings are supposed to be eating, those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be like the Jebusites. But I will encamp at my temple and guard it against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for now I am keeping watch. So this is, again, as we've seen a lot of times in the book of Zechariah, this is reconciliation with Israel, with Judah, right, with Jerusalem. And then we have here the coming of Zion's king. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey. We spoke about how the New Testament purposes or repurposes this prophecy right here and has Jesus riding down from the Mount of Olives and entering Jerusalem through the eastern gate on a donkey, which of course never happened. But we spoke about how the New Testament will take prophecies from the Old Testament and try to retrofit Jesus's story to fit those prophecies, to give his story more credulity, to make it seem like it's more true, and to make it seem like Jesus was the Messiah, was quote unquote the King of the Jews. Okay, I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. This is again talking about this king, okay, the restoration of the Davidic dynasty. As for you, and this is clearly, well, see, we always have a question in Zechariah: is it prophecy that's meant to be for the returning exiles of Judah, or is it end of days prophecy, or is it both? We will tackle that question. We've spoken about it a number of times. We'll continue to ask this question as we see some more prophecies in the book of Zechariah. He will proclaim peace to the nations. Again, this king, his rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Of course, Jesus never did that, right? As for you, so couldn't be talking about him, though the Christians would like to say it is. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I'll free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Even now, I will announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I will bend Judah as I bend my bow and fill it with Ephraim. I will rouse your son Zion against your son's Greece and make you like the warrior's sword. And then let's read quickly through this. Then Yahweh will appear over them. His arrow will flash like lightning. Sovereign Yahweh will sound the trumpet. He will march in the storms of the south, and Yahweh Almighty will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with sling stones. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar. Yahweh, their God, will save his people on that day as a shepherd saves his flock. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young women. So that is Zechariah chapter 9, and that's what we read through last week. So this is by way of review. Does anyone have any questions or any comments? Shabbat Shalom, Vania. Shabbat Shalom, Core 2. Very good, Mosul. You got it. You got it, pal. Anyone have any questions or any comments before we go on to Zechariah chapter 10? If not, let's go on to Zechariah chapter 10. Give me 1 second. I will be right back. Right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm trying to open up the windows again since the noise stopped. Let's give that a shot. Turn on the light. Get the light going here. And We are good to go. Okay, so we're in Zechariah chapter 10. Let's dig in. We're going to dig into the Hebrew. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the study. And we're going to dig in with the Hebrew. Now, there's been a bit of a problem. I'm going to try one more time. I think it has not been working to get the whole chapter to come up, so you may have to go verse by verse in the Hebrew, which is fine. We'll manage. I actually wrote, this is the site that I've been using for years. It's BibleHub.com. I highly recommend it. A lot of good stuff on there. There's a whole bunch of study aids and different translations of the Tanakh. It's good. It has Christian stuff as well, but it has a lot of the Tanakh stuff in there. At any rate, the page where it brings up the whole chapter at once has not been working. I wrote them an email. They said they're working on it, but they're a volunteer organization. So it might take a bit of time, but no big deal. We can manage here. And so we are now in Zechariah chapter 10, verse 1. Okay, so let's dig in. Let's dig in. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So we're going to use this version here, okay? A bit bigger than that. There we go. That's good for everyone to see. So, okay. So we're going to go out to the semicolon. Remember, as I always point out, this little etnach symbol, this little wishbone symbol is like a semicolon. Just about every verse in the entire Tanakh has one. And you can always break the verse down into two subverses, technically called versets. I like to call them verselets because verselets sounds better to me than versets, but you guys get the idea. Okay, so alrighty, so sha'alu mi Yahweh matar be'et malkosh. Yahweh oseh hazizim. So ask of Yahweh for rain in the time of the later rains. I'll talk about what the later rains means in just a second. Yahweh oseh hazizim. Yahweh makes, hazizim is translated as a lightning flash. Let's see, bright clouds, hazizim. Let's look up exactly what it means, because again, as I've said many times, and I'm doing this as much for you guys to show you how to study when you come across a word that you don't know. If you look it up, as I've said many times, if you look at the various translations and see different translations, so here it says bright clouds. When I go over this, I don't think it shows up on the screen. It says thunderbolt. If we looked at other translations, storm clouds, the Lord who makes the storm clouds, the bright clouds, the rain clouds, so on and so forth. Okay, when you see that there are different translations into English or whatever language you're looking at the Tanakh in, then that's a sign that the translators, that it's not clear exactly what the word means, and you'll get different translations. So let's take a look for a second. So the word is haziz. That's how you say it in Hebrew, haziz. You can see it here in the English transliteration, haziz. And here, this is again one of the great things about the site Bible Hub is you can click on any of the words in Hebrew. You're going to get a whole bunch of information about it. But let's go down to the BDB. We can just read up here first of all. Let me make this a little bit smaller, actually. Okay, so a bright cloud or lightning. Then NASB storm clouds, and it really only appears this word, or this root, I should say this word, only appears 3 times in the entire Tanakh, in Job 28:26, Job 38:25. So 2 in Job, and Job has many words that don't appear elsewhere in the Tanakh. Job is very poetic kind of language and contains famously a lot of words that you're not going to find elsewhere in the Tanakh, or will find very infrequently elsewhere in the Tanakh. And here in our first Zechariah chapter 10, verse 1. So the BDB translates it, this is the Brown Driver Briggs. This is also an excellent biblical Hebrew dictionary. You can have it free online here as well. So thunderbolt, lightning flash. So that's what the BDB is calling it, okay? And so on and so forth. Okay. So Yahweh oseh hazizim, he makes thunderbolts. Let's go with that. That's the end of our or that's our semicolon right there. That's the end of the first subverse. Mutar geshem yiten lachem leish esev b'sadeh. And I guess, how would we even translate this? I would say as strong rain. Here they translate it, showers of rain. So matar means rain and geshem means rain, but it's different types of rain. Iten lahem, he will give to them. Leish esev b'sadeh, to each man he will give grass in the field. Okay, so let's just put this together. This is the KJV. I never use the KJV, but we have to happen to have it here. No, let's go to the Robert Alter translation for a second and see if he has any commentary on this first verse. So, asked of the Lord rain in the season of the latter rains. I'm going to explain in a minute what the latter rains means. Yahweh makes lightning and drenching rain, so he translates it as lightning. He gives to every man the grass of the field. Okay, so, and we have a commentary there. So let's see if Robert Alter has anything interesting about that. In Hebrew, two synonyms, matar geshem, joined in the construct state, signifying intensification. Okay, so what he's talking about is something we've said many times, and we're looking at these two words right here. Okay, and let me again make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so this word here is matar, and this word here is geshem. They both mean rain, so that's why you're going to get translation like showers of rain. The translators are not going to know exactly how to deal with this. They both mean essentially the same thing. But so this means rain of rains or something like that. And we've always said many times, or showers of rain, right? Showers of rain is how they translate here. As we've said many times, to say pretty much every Torah study, that when you have repetition in the Torah, it means emphasis. So again, so Robert Alter translates it as drenching rain. So he kind of uses this word drenching to emphasize that it's emphasis, right? So maybe a better way to translate it would be he will give rain of rains, or lots and lots of rain to them, right? So these are basically synonyms. It would be like saying, like we see here, showers of rain, right? It means basically the same thing. Okay, so again, we see that this is a verse, or this chapter is going to be, it would seem so far, a chapter again of reconciliation. A lot of what we've seen in Zechariah so far is reconciliation between the exiles returning from Babylon and Yahweh desiring to turn his face back to Jerusalem that he'd exiled with the Babylonian exile about 50 years earlier. Okay, all right, let's go on. Check in, see if there's any questions or comments. And I don't see that there are, so we're going to go on to chapter 2, verse 2. Okay, again, usually I do the whole chapter at one time, but there's a problem with the site, so that's okay. And I'll mention another time. I was going to mention what the late rains are very briefly. If you live in Israel, you'll know that generally what happens is, so we've spoken many times about the dry season from approximately April 15th until approximately October 15th. And then the wet or the rainy season from October 15th to April 15th, again, approximately. And so in the rainy season, also called Choref, there are really only two seasons mentioned in the Tanakh, Karaites and Choref. It really means the dry season and the rainy season. And in the rainy season, what usually happens, and if you live in Israel or have ever spent a lot of time in Israel, you know this firsthand, you're going to get the early rains, Yoreh, it's called, in Hebrew, Yoreh. And then it's usually kind of around, I would say, mid-December, late December, there's kind of a break. It's not always consistent, but there's kind of a break where you get a bunch of sunny weather, mostly sunny weather for a couple of weeks. And then maybe into January, and then you're going to start getting these late rains towards the end of the spring. You're going to get you're going to get more showers, and those are the late rains. Okay, so there's the early rains and the late rains. Anyway, okay. So what do we have here? Git tirafim dibru awen. Let's translate up into there. So the tirafim are it's usually translated as like a household idol, is the way they usually translate it. Here they just translated the KJV, which I don't like. Translates it. Let's see, is NIV down here anyway? No, we don't have the NIV. Terafim, they don't even translate it here. Anyway, it's kind of like these portable little idols. It's spoken about. The same word is used in the story of Rachel when Jacob flees Lavan. And it says that Rachel had actually hidden these little idols. They're like little dolls, like little portable idols, right? Like there's idols that you had in the temple of the idol. Those are big statues. And they have these little portable, like household idols, they usually translate it as, that you carry around with them. Almost like, maybe like carrying around a little statuette of a saint, right, in the Catholic world, right, that you can put on your countertop or something like that. You can, if you move, you can take it with you, or if, I don't know, you're going on vacation, maybe you can take it with you. Maybe almost like the cross that the Christians will wear around their neck. At any rate, he had tirafim dibru aven. So these idols, we're just going to translate as idols here, spoke nothingness. Aven is here they translate as vanity. Awen, iniquity. But they spoke, basically, the context here is they spoke nothing because idols don't speak. Okay. The Kosmim Hazul Shaker, and the purveyors of witchcraft or wizardry, so the wizards, right? The witches, the male witches, Hazul Shaker. They gave lying visions or visions of lies. Okay, halamot, the halamot hashav, and empty visions or empty dreams. Okay. Idabru halamot hashav, idabru hevel yetnachemun. Alken nasu komotzon ya'anu ki en ro'eh. All right, let's get a translation from Robert Alter for a change. Okay, so he translates it as household gods spoke deceits, the sorcerers envisioned lies, and vain dreams do they speak. With mere breath they console, therefore they have strayed like sheep, wandered, for there is no shepherd. Okay, all right, let's see if there's anything we want to say here. I can close this off. I think we can do this. Let's see if I can do this slightly differently. 1 second, please. I know what we can do. Okay. Ketarafim dibru awen makosmi hazu sheker v'halamot hashav yidabru hevel yenachemun alken nasu komotzon ya'anu ki en ro'eh. Right. So this imagery here is that basically all of the seers of vision are speaking lies, or speaking vanity, and therefore they, speaking about the Israelites, and again, what it's really speaking about is the Israelites that were exiled to Babylon. Therefore they traveled like sheep, and ya'anu, they had trouble because there was no shepherd. So the image here is because of all these diviners or all these seers of visions are seeing false visions, that Israel was like a flock of sheep without a shepherd. That's essentially what it's saying here. Okay. Let's see here. So Robert Alter says these domestic icons, terafim, were used for divination. So we spoke about the household idols. It's often translated as wandered. The Masoretic text reads Ya'anu, answered or were afflicted. This translates supposed reversal of consonants and reads instead no. Okay, this is the technical note. We don't have to get into that right now. Okay, let's go on to verse 3. So verse 3, I'm going to not use the KJV. I'll use the NIV if we need to refer to another English translation. Let's just look at it in the English for a second. Okay, so my anger burns against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders. For Yahweh Almighty will care for his flock, the people of Judah, and make them like a proud horse in battle. Let's see that in the Hebrew. Here we go. Al ha'ro'im hara'api ve'al Tudim, Ifkod, Ki pakad Yahweh tzivot et edro. Let's translate up until there. Okay, so al haroim hara api, upon the shepherds, I became furious. Literally, fire came out of my nose. Hara api, ve'al atudim ifkod. Atudim is it's a goat. So once again, let's see how the NIV translates it. Okay, and I'll punish the leaders. So the NIV translates it as leaders, Robert Alter, but literally it says there the goats. Let's see what Robert Alter has to say about that one. Okay, and with the he goats, I will make a reckoning. So I'm sure we'll get an explanation of that. Because Yahweh has brought a reckoning, or Yahweh of hosts has brought a reckoning upon his flock. Et Beit Yehuda, upon the house of Judah. The Sam, Otam, Gesus, Hodo, B'milchama, and made them like a horse who is glorified in war. Okay? All right, let's see what we got here. So for the Lord of armies has singled out his flock, the house of Judah, and made them like a stallion, his glory in battle. Let's get a little commentary on that. Okay, this stock epithet. So the shepherds, the stock epithet for leaders, picks up the sheep metaphor of the previous line. In the second verset, he goats is another fixed epithet for leaders, and make a reckoning or signaled out. The same verb, pakad, is used for both, but because it has both positive and negative meaning, divergent English equivalents are necessary. Fine, fair enough. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, verse 4. So this is the English. From Judah will come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler. Let's look at that in Hebrew. Again, sorry, this is not the way I usually do it, but I can't get the whole Hebrew page at once. Okay. And we can see it's very poetic, right? So we're going to have to kind of make sense of what it's saying here. So mimenu pina, so from him shall become the corner or the cornerstone. Mimenu yated, from him shall be the tent peg. Mimenu keshet, milchama, from him shall be the bow of war. Mimenu itzekol nogesh yachtav, and from out of him shall come every, well, here NIV translates it as every ruler. I don't think that's a very good translation. And Robert Alter translates it as commander. A nogesh is like an overlord or an overseer. Okay, so nogesh yachtav. So from him will come out every commander. Okay, again from Judah. All right, let's look at the English. I'll go with the Robert Alter translation. Let's just translate verses, or let's look at the translation from verses 1 through 4, just to get an idea. Again, this is very poetic of what is going on. Let's get the context here. Okay, so I'm again reading from the English translation, the Robert Alter translation. Ask Yahweh rain in the season of the latter rains. The Lord makes lightning and drenching rain. He gives to every man the grass of the field. For the household gods, for the idols spoke deceit, and the sorcerers envisioned lies. In vain dreams do they speak. With mere breath they console. Therefore they have strayed like sheep, wandered, for there is no shepherd. Against the shepherds I am incensed, and with the he-goats I will make a reckoning. For the Lord of armies has singled out his flock, the house of Judah, and made them like a stallion, his glory in battle. From them the cornerstone, and from them the tent peg, from them the bow of battle, and from them all commanders together. Okay, and we're up to verse 5. So let's just read it first in the English. And they shall be as warriors trampling the mud of the streets in battle, and they shall battle for, and this is speaking about, now we see the context is speaking about Judah, right? Speaking about Judea. Okay, and they shall be as warriors trampling the mud of the streets in battle, and they shall battle, for Yahweh is with them, and they shall put the horsemen to shame. And this is verse 5. Let's take a look in the Hebrew. Okay. היו כגיבורים בוסים בתית חוצות. Okay, so they will be like heroes or like warriors, bosim, treading upon. Betit chutzot is the mud in the streets, the grime in the streets. B'milchama v'nilchamu. So that's the way they'll be in war, and they will go to battle. Ki Yahweh imam, because Yahweh is with them. V'vishu rochvei susim, and they will literally dry out, is what this says, but it means they will, I guess, wear out, or they will, let's see, let's get a good translation here. Okay. Put the horsemen to shame. So I'm sorry, it's not from dry out, it's from bush, from bash, which means to put to shame. So they'll put the riders of the horses to shame. Okay. All right, let's go into verse 6. Okay, let's look at the NIV for this particular one. So I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. They will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. Okay, and in Hebrew, Gibarti et Beit Yehuda, et Beit Yosef, Hoshea. Let's go up until there. So I will make strong the house of Judah. That's the southern kingdom. Ve'et Beit Yosef, that's the northern kingdom, Hoshea. So we know that after the reign of Solomon, the kingdom of Israel was split, or the totality of Israel was split into two kingdoms: the southern kingdom, originally ruled by King Rehoboam, and the northern kingdom ruled by Yerovam. That's when the split occurred. And again, we see here this prophecy of both of these kingdoms gaining their strength. And so it's prophecy of reconciliation. Okay, Beit Yosef Hoshea. So Beit Yosef represents the northern kingdom, because the main tribe in that northern kingdom, called Israel, called the kingdom of Israel, was Ephraim. Ephraim was one of the sons of Joseph. Okay. Well, Shivotim ki hamtim, and I will bring them back, or I will restore them because I've had mercy upon them. And it will be as if I had never abandoned them, never gone away from them. And because I am Yahweh their God, and I shall answer them. Okay, let's get a Robert Alter translation here. Okay, and I will make the house of Judah mighty. And the house of Joseph I will make victorious, and I will restore them, for I will have mercy upon them. And they shall be as though I never forsook them, for I, Yahweh, am Yahweh their God, and I will answer them. Let's get a little commentary. So verse 4 spoke about the cornerstone, the tent peg, and the bow. These are all metaphors for the leaders or champions of the people. At the end of the line, the literal reference of all of these is introduced in commanders. It should be noted that the Hebrew term for commander, nogesh, generally has a negative meaning, taskmaster or overseer. It's spoken about in the story of the Exodus, that Pharaoh placed overseers or taskmasters over the Israelite slaves, but that cannot be the case here. The shift in meaning may reflect the fluidity of late biblical Hebrew. Trampling the mud of the streets in battle, we saw that in verse 5, is not entirely evident why the warriors should be trampling mud. Perhaps it's intended as an image of conquest. The troops stomp through the streets of the conquered city, overwhelming all that stands in their way. It is also possible that an object of the verb is dropped out. The literal sense of the Hebrew is in the mud of the streets, and that the original text meant trampling the slain like the mud of the streets. Okay, again, that's kind of a technical point. He's saying that perhaps there's a word missing from that was not brought down from the original text. Okay, so we're up to now verse 7. And let me just make this a bit smaller. And we have 12 verses. So we see this very poetic. Okay. All right. Let's look at the Hebrew, verse 7. Okay, make this a bit bigger. Okay, Wa'yu ki gibor Ephraim, and Ephraim shall be like a mighty man. Usamach libam kamo yayin, and their hearts will be happy like wine, or as if they had imbibed wine. Uvedehem yir'u usamechu yagel libam Yahweh, and their children shall see this and be happy, and their heart shall rejoice in Yahweh. Okay, let's get a translation or two here. So Ephraim shall be like a warrior, and their heart shall rejoice as from wine, and the children shall see and rejoice, and their heart shall exult in Yahweh. Okay. Verse 8. Okay. Esharakalahim v'kabetzim ki piditim. Let's go up to there. That's the first half of the verse, or the first part of the verse. I will whistle to them, and I will gather them in. Kabetzim. I will gather them in. Okay, this is from the same word as kibbutz. You've all heard of a kibbutz. A kibbutz is a collective. So this is saying I will collect them. I will gather them in. Piditim, because I have remembered them. Or here translated as redeem them. I've redeemed them. I've remembered them. I've turned my attention towards them for good. Rabu kamo ve'rabu kimo rabu, and they shall increase as they shall increase, or they shall increase greatly. Would be a good translation of that, I think. Okay. Here Robert Alter translates it as they shall increase as before. I will whistle to them and gather them. Right. So just like again, maybe more of this imagery of a shepherd whistling to his sheep, and then the sheep go in a certain direction. Right. He calls the sheep by whistling. If you've ever seen videos of shepherds, they have these various whistles that they can direct the sheep with the whistles, or they direct at least the dogs with the whistles, and then those dogs direct the sheep. So I will whistle to them and gather them, for I will ransom them, and they shall increase as before. Let's get a little commentary. I will whistle to them. Whistling appears elsewhere as a signal for the marching of the troops. Sound that may have been produced with some sort of wooden whistle. They shall increase as before. More literally, they shall increase as they increased. Okay. Rabu como rabu. Okay. That is verse 8. Verse 9. So up to 9. Okay. Ve'azarem ba'amim u'b'merchakim yizkaruni. So I will actually going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And I don't even want to look at the KJV. I don't even want it on the screen because it's such a poor translation. So I will scatter them like seed among the nations. The underlying root. Every Hebrew word has a root, a 3-letter root usually, sometimes a 2-letter root. In rare cases, a repeated 2-letter root, which makes a 4-letter root, but generally a 3-letter root. And the root here is these middle 3 letters. I can't really single them out. Oh, it's coming up. Okay, but it's these 3 letters. This one, and this one. Zayin, Resh, Ayin, which means seed. So I will scatter them like seed among the nations. This is among the nations. And when they are in these distant lands, they will remember me. V'achayu et b'nehem ushavu, and they will make their children live and return, or their living children shall return. Again, this is all very poetic, so it's a bit difficult to get a kind of pin down an exact translation. We'll look at the NIV, which is a decent translation. Okay, though I scatter them among the peoples yet in distant lands, they will remember me. They and their children will survive, and they will return. Robert Alter says, and I will sow them. Right, he's good. So sow them, picking up on sowing seed, right? I will sow them among the peoples, in far places they shall recall me, and they shall thrive with their children and return. Okay, let's go on to verse 10. Any commentary there for verse 9? So the idea that the exiles are planted far and wide in order to flourish. Okay. Verse 10. Oops. Verse 10. So I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and from Assyria, and I will ingather them from Assyria. So bring them back from Egypt, and I will ingather them from Assyria. Eretz Gilad v'Lebanon aviim v'lo yimatzeh lehem. And to the land of Gilad and to Lebanon, I will bring them. V'lo yimatzeh lehem. And no, it will not be found for them, meaning the implication here is there won't be enough room for them. So many exiles will be coming back that there will not be enough room. Okay? And still shall not suffice for them. So the way Robert Alter translates it. Let's get a little commentary there. I will bring them back from Egypt and from Assyria. The invocation of lands to the south and to the far northeast is meant to express the comprehensiveness of the ingathering of the exiles. In the 4th century BCE, there was a substantial diaspora community in Egypt. Assyria no longer existed, but it had become a byword for distant exile. Okay? A little bit more. It's a bit warm in here. Verse 11. Okay. So verse 11. All right. So, oops, and they'll pass through the sea with trouble. Galim, and the waves shall hit upon the sea. And they shall dry up. And they shall dry up all the deep places of the rivers, or the river. And the Gaon, the pride of the Assyrians of Assyria, shall be brought down, and the scepter shall go away from Egypt. Let's explain what this means. I don't even want to look at this KJV version. It's too horrible. Translation. I won't even look at it. I'll have to put it on the screen. So, okay. Avar b'yam tzara, v'ika b'yam galim. So they shall pass through the sea, or he shall pass through the sea with trouble, and the waves shall be kagalim bayam, and the waves shall hit upon the sea. Vishu kol mitzulot yaor, and dry up all the depths of the river. V'urad gaon Ashur, as we said, the pride of the Assyrians of Assyria will be brought down, and the scepter shall disappear from Egypt. The scepter is literally the head of a tribe, or the head of a nation would carry literally a scepter, and so this is a figurative way of saying, or literally it's saying the scepter of Egypt shall disappear, but it's basically saying that the strength of Egypt shall be taken away, shall disappear. Okay, so let's get a little translation here. And he shall pass through the sea against the foe, and strike waves in the sea, and all the depths of the Nile shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall vanish. Let's get a little commentary on that. The he would be Israel, transformed by God into a mighty warrior, but the three Hebrew words of the verset, Amar b'yam tzara, are cryptic. A lot of this chapter is cryptic, and a lot of Zechariah is very poetic and cryptic. One possible literal rendering would be, and he shall pass through the sea in straits. Given the militant context, the last of these three words has been construed as a collective noun meaning foe, and against is assumed to be implied by ellipsis. Okay, we're just going to skip that. And the last verse in the chapter, verse 12. And I shall make them strong in Yahweh, ubishmo yitachu, and they shall walk in his name, declares Yahweh. Okay. The NIV says, I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely, declares the Lord. Robert Alter translates that as, I will make them mighty in the Lord, and in his name they shall go about, said the Lord. See if there's any commentary there, and there's not. Okay. Again, because this is such a kind of poetic, and Zechariah is not an easy book for the most part to deal with. We saw in the previous book that we studied, Malachi, the last book of the Tanakh, the language was much more straightforward. This is much more poetic. But let's sum it up by going through from beginning to end, okay, and ask Yahweh for rain in the springtime. It is Yahweh who sends the thunderstorms. He gives showers of rain to all the people and plants the field to everyone. The idols speak deceitfully. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. And they give comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep, oppressed for lack of a shepherd. My anger burns against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders, or as we saw there, the goats. For Yahweh Almighty will care for his flock, the people of Judah, and make them a proud horse in battle. From Judah will come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler. Together they will be like warriors in battle, trampling the enemy into the mud of the streets. They will fight because Yahweh is with them, and they will put the enemy horsemen to shame. I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. They will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am Yahweh their God, and I will answer them. The Ephraimites will become like warriors, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in Yahweh. I will signal for them and gather them in. Surely I will redeem them. They will be as numerous as before. Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands they will remember me. They and their children will survive, and they will return. I will bring them back from Egypt and gather them from Assyria. I will bring them to Gilad and Lebanon, and there will not be enough room for them. They will pass through the sea of trouble. The surging sea will be subdued, and all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Assyria's pride will be brought down, and Egypt's scepter will pass away. I will strengthen them in Yahweh, and in his name they will live securely. And I'm going to go through it one more time with the Robert Alter translation, again, because it's so poetic and not easy to wrap one's head around. Let's go through it one more time. Repetition is very good for learning. So, ask of Yahweh rain in the season of the latter rains. Yahweh makes lightning and drenching rain. He gives to every man the grass of the field. But the household gods spoke deceit, and the sorcerers envisioned lies. In vain dreams did they speak. With mere breath they console. Therefore, they strayed like sheep, wandered, for there is no shepherd. Against the shepherd I am incensed. Against the shepherds I am incensed, and with the he-goats I will make a reckoning. For Yahweh of armies has signaled out his flock, the house of Judah, and made them like a stallion, his glory in battle. From them the cornerstone, from them the tent peg, from them the bow of battle, from them all commanders together, and they shall be as warriors trampling the mud of the streets in battle, and they shall battle, for Yahweh is with them, and they shall put the horsemen to shame. And I will make the house of Judah mighty, and the house of Joseph I will make victorious, and I will restore them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I never forsook them, for I am Yahweh their God, and will answer them. And Ephraim shall be like a warrior, and their heart shall rejoice as from wine, and their children shall see and rejoice, their heart shall exult in Yahweh. I will whistle to them and gather them, for I will ransom them, and they shall increase as before, and I will sow them among the peoples. In far places they shall recall me, and they shall thrive with their children and return. And I will bring them back from the land of Egypt, and from Assyria I will gather them. Into the land of Gilad and Lebanon I will bring them, and still it shall not suffice for them. And he shall pass through the sea against the foe, and strike waves in the sea, and all the depths of the Nile shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall vanish. And I will make them mighty in Yahweh, and in his name they shall go about, says Yahweh. Okay, so that is Zechariah chapter 10. Very poetic, not easy to wrap one's head around. Next time we'll go into chapter 11. And there are a total of 14 chapters in Zechariah. Okay, so we've got 11, 12, 13, 14. We have 4 more chapters. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? If not, let's take a very quick break. And we will come back and dig into Leviticus chapter 25.
strong. Faster! With the steam of the whip on my shoulder, with the salt of my sweat on my brow, and oh, keep God on high, can you hear your people cry? Help us now, this dark hour. Deliver us, hero God, deliver us. Lord of all, remember us, still in this burning sand. Deliver us, there's a land you promised us. Deliver us to the promised land. ילדי הטוב והרע, אל תירא ואל תפחד. My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. I pray we'll meet again if he will deliver us. Hear our prayer, deliver us from this very years of slavery, broken road to stand. Deliver us, there's a land you promised us. Deliver us out of bondage. Deliver us to the cross. Hush now, my baby, be still now, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby. So I'll be with you when you dream. River, oh river, flow gently for me. Such precious cargo you bear. Do you know somewhere he can live free? River, deliver him there.
Okay, we're back. Welcome back once again. This is the World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. We're going to be digging in now to Leviticus chapter 25, which we've been studying for a number of weeks now. And, well, you guys all know the deal. I've said it all a million times before, but there are different ways to join the World Alliance of Qara'im. And you can just look at the announcement. I'm not going to do the whole thing right now. I usually do the plug for funding. You know, we're working on a bunch of projects, so anyone that feels it in their heart to support our projects, that would be very, very much appreciated. We have set up a community here in Israel, in northern Israel, in the Golan Heights. We have regular meetings. We're trying to set up a bunch of other projects, such as a learning center, a school, regular publications, and so on and so forth. Again, you could read about it in the announcement. So if you want to join the World Alliance of Qara'im as a member, I'm going to post the link. Okay. It's a membership link. Okay, and we're asking a very little amount to become a basic member. About, as I always say, it's about half the price of a cell phone service or a monthly cell phone service in the United States. And this money, it all goes to our projects that we're working on. And we have a lot of projects that we're working on that we want to continue working on. We want to be working on. So please help us out with that. And also, there are a lot of benefits to membership. You can read about it at that link. You get basically you get a lot more access to the resources of the World Alliance of Qara'im. It's only fair, right? Because we have limited time, we have limited resources, and so we have to ration that out. I mean, obviously, if someone has a serious situation, then I'm not going to ration it out. But in general, we give priority to those who are showing that they're serious in helping us out. Okay. That's what I have to say about that. There's a group, if you're not part of the World Alliance of Qara'im WhatsApp announcements group, that's a good place to be in, because you'll get announcements about what studies we have coming up. We've started doing a regular podcast. We've done already a number of podcasts, and we have more coming up. So that should be interesting. And all of the podcasts are on both the Karaite Insights and the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel under the playlist podcasts. You can find them there. We've had some interesting conversations so far with a number of different people. And yeah, other than that, if you regularly tithe, as some people do, give a portion of your income to charity, or if you just like to give, as they call it in the Jewish world, give tzedakah, like to give charity, then we have different ways of doing that. Again, you can look at the announcement. If it's a larger amount, then you can contact me privately, and we do have a nonprofit organization set up in the United States that can receive that. So that's it. That's all I have to say about that. I got nothing else to say about that. Okay. So yeah, you can check out the announcement for all of the details. But please get involved, and if it's in your heart to do so, then help us out financially. Okay. Let's go on to Leviticus chapter 25. Let me share the screen. And Leviticus 25 is a fascinating chapter. I was able to get the whole chapter up in Hebrew, thank God. But by way of review, let's just read through again. Okay. Down to, I don't think we should, because it's going to be too long. Yeah, we'll read through, I promise, without any commentary, just to get the context. Okay, so Yahweh said to Moses at Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to Yahweh. For 6 years for 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the seventh year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, the seventh Sabbath, right? The Sabbath to Yahweh. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and your female servants, the hired worker and the temporary resident who live among you. Just as I said, on the Shabbat, we rest so that these underprivileged classes can rest. It says in Exodus chapter 20. Here, the land rests so that these underprivileged classes can have basically free food for a year, as well as for your livestock. And so the Torah takes care of the underprivileged classes within the nation, because God, Yahweh, is merciful, and he's a loving and merciful God, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. The year of the Jubilee. Okay, so we said that this is not a good translation. This is a transliteration of the Hebrew word Yovel. Yovel is essentially an animal horn or a ram's horn. So it's really the year of the ram's horn, or the year that is announced by blasting on the ram's horn, as we shall see now. Count off 7 Shabbat years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Shabbat years amount to a period of 49 years. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land, right? So on the 10th day of the 7th month of the 49th year, that 7th cycle of 7 years each, then you sound they translate as trumpet, but it really says the Yovel, the ram's horn, or the animal horn, okay? So that's why it's called that 50th year is called the year of the ram's horn, or the Jubilee year. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. We said that's the inscription. Leviticus chapter 25:10 is what's inscribed on the Liberty Bell that sits in Philadelphia. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee, right? It is a ram's horn year, and it is to be holy for you. Eat only, or it is a year that's announced by the ram's horn in the end of the previous, or towards the end of the agricultural season of the previous year. For it is a Jubilee and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. In this year of Jubilee, everyone is to return to their own property. We said in the Torah, there is no such thing as being landless. If you're an Israelite, you're given as your inheritance, as your right, a piece of land, a piece of the land of Israel. Imagine if everyone in America got as their right a piece of land, right? It almost makes sense. If America is for all of its citizens, then wouldn't that be a nice idea? That everyone in the United States got a piece of land which they don't have to pay property taxes on, can never be taken away from them. If they want to, they can rent it out for 49 years, but in the 50th year, it goes back to them, right? Isn't that a wonderful idea? It would certainly equalize, it would certainly, the United States likes to talk about how much it, the little man can rise up, or you can pick yourself up by the bootstraps and raise up. But it's become harder and harder to do that, and I think we can all agree that one of the main reasons for that is the lack of fair distribution of the wealth, the concentration of the wealth in the hands of the ultra wealthy, like the Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg types and so on, and right, and the little guy has less and less of a chance each year in the United States of America. Well, if everyone had a piece of land that was theirs, that you didn't have to pay property taxes on, in fact, that you could rent out, that can never be taken away from you, not by the government or not by anyone else, can only be rented out for a period of up to 50 years, then imagine how that would redistribute the wealth, right? Make the United States more of a fair country for everybody. Okay, you're to buy from your own people on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee, and they're to sell you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops. When the years are many, you're to increase the price, and when the years are few, you're to decrease the price, because what is really being sold to you is the number of crops. In other words, since you can lease your land out only for a maximum of 50 years, or until the next Jubilee year, which can be at most 50 years away, if the previous one just happened, then you lease out your land based on how many years there are left until the Jubilee year, because then it goes back to its owner. You cannot rent out past the Jubilee year. Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am Yahweh, your God. Verse 18, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. You may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. That's talking about in the Jubilee year. So it'll yield enough for the 49th year, which is that 7th Shabbat year. Then the 50th year, which is Jubilee, and then it'll last through that 50th year and into the 51st year. So for 3 years total, inclusive counting. The Torah generally works on something called inclusive counting. So it'll be enough for those 3 years until, well, while you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. Throughout the land that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. So redemption of the land, what does that mean? This is what we read last week, and we'll continue in verse 29. We'll switch over to the Hebrew. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, the nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. If, however, there is no one to redeem it for them, but later on they prosper and acquire sufficient means to redeem it themselves, then they are to determine the value for the years since they sold it and refund the balance to the one to whom they sold it. They can go back to their own property. In other words, okay, let's say, what's going on here? Okay, the only reason you're going to lease out your property is if you're desperate for the money, right? Because it's your land, okay? It's your inheritance. But if you're super desperate for the money, you're going to lease it out to somebody else. But it's not an ideal situation, right? That's a last resort. So because it's such a last resort, if you have a relative who can buy it back for you, so let's say again, I'll just give an example. Let's say it's 25 years until the next Jubilee year. Okay, I think I gave this example last year. And if I would rent it out for the full 50 years, then I'd rent it out for, let's say, $1 million. Okay, just making up round numbers. If there's 25 years left until the next Jubilee year, I'm going to rent it out for half of that, $500,000, because only half the time left, right? That's what we saw up above. You rent it out based on the number of years left until the next Jubilee year, because then the next Jubilee year goes back automatically. So, okay, let's say there's 25 years left until the next Jubilee year. I rent it out to someone for $500,000. And then couple of years later, my relative, I have a close relative, my uncle, hits the lottery and becomes a multi-millionaire. And he says, you know what? I'm going to buy that back for you. Okay, that's what this is talking about here. I'm going to buy your property back for you. It's not a good situation that you're living, that you're not in possession of your own property, that you became poor, so you had to lease it out to somebody else. Okay, and it is 5 years later. So if we said originally he leased it out when they were 25 years into the Jubilee year, now it's 5 years later, there's 20 years until the next Jubilee year, the relative has the right at any time to go to that lessee, I think that's the right name, the person that he leased it out to, and buy it back. Okay, is at any time. That's what we're talking about here, the right of redemption. And the person himself or a close relative has the right of redemption of that property at any given time. Even if he said, I'm going to lease it to you for 25 years, and he took the $500,000, then the relative can say, listen, I came into a bunch of money. It's 5 years later. I'm buying it back from you. Okay, I'm going to give you your money back, except for the 5 years that you had possession of it or that you were leasing it, and now I'm going to buy it back. Even though we had originally agreed to 25 years, I, as his relative, or he has the right to have it come back into his hand at any given times, and I, his rich relative, I'm going to do it for him. Okay, that's what it's speaking about here. It's precisely what it's saying. So they are determined, let's even read this. If one of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell some of their property, the nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. If, however, there is no one to redeem it for them, but later on they prosper and acquire sufficient means to redeem it themselves. So either the nearest of kin, right? The near of kin, okay, or the person himself, if he hits the jackpot, okay, then they are to determine the value for the year since they sold it and refund the balance to the one whom they sold it. So again, giving the example, if I were to lease it out for 50 years until the maximum amount of time until the next Jubilee year, I would lease it out for $1 million for those 50 years. Again, in our example here, we leased it out when there were 25 years left until the Jubilee year. So I leased it out for $500,000. Okay. That means that it is, let's do the math here. So $500,000, 500,000 divided by 25, so 50. So that is going to be 50,000. Did I do that right? No, wait a second, 25,000. I should know this off the top of my head instantly, but 25. Okay, so if it's 25 years is $500,000, then that's going to be $20,000 per year, right? 20 times 25 is indeed 500,000. Okay, so it's going to be $20,000 per year. It's 5 years later. Either my relative has become rich or I've become rich, and I decide that I want to buy it back. Okay, before, even though I agreed to until the next Jubilee year, or I agreed for however many years, I'm going to buy it back now. 5 years have passed, so the person has basically used 1/5 of the time. He paid me $500,000, so I'm going to refund him $400,000, and I keep the $100,000 because he used it for 5 years. It's now 5 years later. It's 20 years until the next Jubilee year. I refund him $400,000 out of the $500,000, and I keep the $100,000 for the 5 years that he was leasing it for. And now it goes back into my hand, and I have the right to do this at any time because it's my land. Okay, I don't have to wait, even if I said, or even if I said I'm not gonna buy it back, or in other words, at any given time I can buy that property back. I can throw him off the property and say, here's your money back for the rest of the years, and I'm taking my property back. It's the right of redemption. Okay, they're to determine the value for the year since they sold it and refund the balance to the one to whom they sold it. They can go back to their own property. But if they do not acquire the means to repay, what was sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. So no matter what, if that Jubilee year is arrived at, then the land goes back to its original owner. Okay, so no one but the original owner can have permanent possession of that piece of land. And that is determined by lots. We see that in the book of Joshua. Each tribe gets a certain possession of the land of Israel, and that's broken down into clans, houses of families, or fathers' houses, and so on. Okay, and why is that? Because really Yahweh owns the land. As it says in verse 23, the land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners or strangers. It's my land. Okay, so so I'm giving it to each person as an inheritance, and nobody else can take it from the person I give it to. Okay. Okay. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and they can then go back to their property. And that's where we were up to. We're in verse 29. So now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. We're in Leviticus chapter 25, 29. Let's get a little bit of a preview. Anyone who sells a house in a walled city retains the right of redemption a full year after its sale. During that time, the seller may redeem it. If it is not redeemed before a full year has passed, the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer and the buyer's descendants. We'll talk about why. It is not to be returned in the Jubilee, but houses and villages without walls around them are to be considered as belonging to the open country. They can be redeemed, and they are to be returned in the Jubilee. Let's look at that in the Hebrew. And we're in verse 29. Okay. So we're in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 29. Let me just check in and see if there are any questions or any comments. And I don't see anybody. I don't see any at the moment. Let's see, is it better this way? Let's see what the difference is. Yeah, I think it's fine this way. Okay, so now that we have the whole chapter on. Verse 29. So a man who sells a house in Beit Moshav, a house in which he dwells, in other words, his own possession, Ir Choma, within a walled city. Okay, Ir is city, Choma means a wall, so a walled city specifically. Why a walled city? We'll talk about that in a second. So he has the right of redemption until the exactly 1 year after, until the end of precisely 1 year after its sale, after he sold it. Okay, so I live in a walled city. Okay, what would be the equivalent in modern times of a walled city? Be a big city, like let's say New York City or something like that. So in other words, what this is saying is the major cities have a different set of rules, because the major cities are not really they're not considered the possession of any particular family. Okay, they're cities, right? Everything's so subdivided. If you go to a city like, okay, if you live out in the farmland, if you live in Nebraska, in farm country, then every family has, I don't know about every, but right, in traditional farm country, which is unfortunately disappearing and dwindling day by day all over the world, and certainly in the United States of America. But each family is going to own its own plot of land, right? And so that's when these previous laws that we spoke about, if the United States follow the Torah, I wish even Israel would follow the Torah. It doesn't even follow the Torah. We spoke about last year how about 97% of the land is owned by the state of Israel. And so you can actually not even own land except for about 3%. It's something called tabu. Tabu means privately owned land. It's a phrase that comes over from the Ottoman, the Turkish possession of, or when the Turks ruled over Israel from approximately 1500, if I remember correctly, 1525 or something like that, until 1917, until World War I. In World War I, when the Turks were on the losing side of World War I, the Brits took over the land of Israel, possession of the land of Israel, as well as all of Transjordan, current day state of Jordan. And so the Brits, the UK, the British Empire ruled over the land of Israel from 1917 until the declaration of independence, the independence by the state of Israel on May 14th, 1948. So at any rate, the point being that most of the land in the state of Israel is owned by the state, it's owned by the government of Israel. And except for rare cases, you can actually not own land in this country. All you could do is lease the land for, I think the maximum is 99 years. And this is because the founders of the state of Israel many of them were communists. They'd come from Russia, many of them, and the Jews were heavily, involved in the communist movement back in Russia. And so when these Zionists, these early Zionists, came from Russia in particular, but also the surrounding countries such as Poland, they brought with them, or they established Israel as essentially a communist state. And there are elements of that communist state that exists, or that communism that exists to this very day. You guys have all heard of kibbutzes. Okay, kibbutz, we saw in Zechariah chapter 10 and Zechariah chapter 10. We saw that word, right? We spoke about that, right? I will gather them in. Well, the word kibbutz means a or I will collect them in, right? A kibbutz is the Hebrew word, the modern Hebrew word for collective, right? What is a collective? Communist. It's a commune. That's literally what it is. So a kibbutz is a commune. Now, a lot of the kibbutzim in the past decades have undergone what's called hafrata, privatization. So they don't really, there's still some that still follow the kibbutz model where everything is shared, but most don't in this day and age. They may follow to a certain degree, but most of them are not really technically, or not really 100% kibbutzim anymore. And at any rate, that's in 100% opposition to what we see here in the Torah, where every family owns its own plot of land that can never be taken away from it, not by the state and not by anybody else. And if it is taken away, then if it has to be leased for a while, or quote unquote sold for a while, then the original owner has the right to redeem it. His kin, his nearest of kin, or his near kin have the right to redeem it at any time for any reason. It's his land. And if he can't, then in the Jubilee year, it goes back to him, right? So we see a big difference between the way the Torah empowers people, empowers individuals by making them landowners. If you're an Israelite, in ancient Israel, you were a landowner. That's it. By decree of the Torah, you were a landowner. In modern Israel, you're not a landowner. In the United States, you may be a landowner, but if you don't pay your property taxes, which are ridiculously high, it depends, I guess, where you live. But I know when I was back visiting my family in New York City this past year, I saw the property tax bill, and it was like, I can't remember what it was, some ridiculous amount, some crazy amount. So if you don't pay that property tax, then that could be taken away from you. So you don't really own land in the United States of America. In Israel, you don't own land because the government owns 97% of the land. But in the Torah, if you're an Israelite, you are a landowner permanently. It can never be taken away from you. Isn't that a beautiful system? Okay, but now we're talking about in a walled city. So why is a walled city different? Again, the analogy would be, if we talk about a city like New York or Chicago or LA, it wouldn't make sense, right? You can't take a half of Manhattan and say, okay, this belongs to, I don't know, the Goldstein family, right? Actually, probably does. But I don't know. The Goldsteins are, but they say the Jews own everything, so probably does one way or another. Any rate, right? It doesn't work in a big city. It doesn't make sense, right? So the rules are going to be different in a big city. And when we read the commentaries, I'm sure that Robert Alter will point something like that out. But let's read what it says here. So the rules are different. We read about the rules in the open land. Okay, you can never, the land belongs to you. You can never forfeit it. You can always buy it. If you have to sell it, if you have to lease it temporarily or sell it temporarily, you can always buy it back. Your relative can always buy it back. And if you can't, then in the Jubilee year, it goes back to you. But this is not the case in a walled city. So if you sell your house, Beit Moshav, your house, your dwelling place within a city, okay, your dwelling house, just see one thing. So Robert also translates it literally as a dwelling house. Okay, in a walled city, then as we said, you can redeem it. You have 1 year to buy it back. Okay, which is pretty cool. So you've signed the contract, but you have a year to regret. Right? What do they call that? They have. Oh, I think my cat wants to come in. Shosho, you want to come in? Come, baby. Let's go. What, baby? In or out? What are we doing? Joe? No, you want to stay out? It's nice and warm in the house, so the cats like staying out a bit more. Right. So you have a year to buy it back. I remember watching this movie. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend. It's really a good movie. Glenn Ross with Al Pacino and a couple of other, very, very good actors. And they sell. So Al Pacino sells this crappy Florida property. It's all about these like kind of slimy salesmen, but it's a very, very interesting movie, and the dialogue is brilliant. So he sells some Florida swampland to some guy, and then the guy comes back the next day and he says I want the contract canceled, and he says that if not, I'm going to go to the district attorney because according to the law I have 3 days to change my mind, right? So that's kind of like a regret, right? I guess the law, I forgot what they call it. There's a specific phrase for it, like regret laws or something like that. But at any rate, that's the same idea that we're seeing here. Okay, so you sold your house. Maybe you had to sell your house. Maybe you were desperate to sell your house. So you have a year to change your mind. You have a year to redeem it, to buy it back. And after that, you can never buy it back. So it's very different from the land in the open areas. And that's what it says here. Okay. So Yamim ad tom shnat mimkaro Yamim ti'eh gulato. So those days, or those are the days of the right of redemption. Those are the days of the right of redemption, that 1 year from the date of sale. Okay. So it should be the end of the year of its sale. A year its redemption shall be. Okay, he's saying this means a year because of Yamim, right? Got it. Right. So for a year shall be the right of redemption. Okay. V'im, verse 30. I should check in to see if there are any questions or any comments. Okay. So verse 30. Wa'im lo yigael ad milot lo shonat mima. Let's translate up into there. And if it has not been redeemed by the end, or by the fulfillment, by the full amount, ad milot lo, until that full year is fulfilled for him, for the seller. Again, I'm trying to translate word for word, but basically, if I would paraphrase, is if he doesn't buy it back within that one full complete year, till the end of that one complete year, the seller, in other words, v'kama bayit asher ba'ir asher lo choma litzmitut lekoneh oto ledorotav. Then I'm going to paraphrase again, because if I go word for word, it's not going to make sense in the English. Well, let me try to go kind of word for word. But kama bayit asher ba'ir, then the house literally arises, but is established. Asher ba'ir asher lo choma, that house that is in the walled city is established permanently, or it becomes the possession permanently of the one who has purchased it for his generations. Okay, who has purchased it, comma, for his generations, or throughout his generations. Okay, in other words, lo yitzeh b'yovel, and it does not go back to the original owner in the Jubilee year. Right? I think it's pretty clear. And the language is beautiful in the Hebrew. It's just so hard to translate these beautiful words. Okay, kama bayit asher ba'ir, literally, kam means to arise. Okay, to rise up, but I can't even think of a word in English that'll do justice. So all I can do is paraphrase. But basically, we see the idea here that if that person doesn't buy it back within the year, then it becomes the possession of. If the seller doesn't buy it back within one complete year, within 1 year exactly, then it becomes the permanent possession of the purchaser, of the buyer, for his descendants, for him and his descendants, the Dorotav, throughout his generations. Lo yitzeh b'yovel, and it does not go back to the seller, to the original seller, in the Jubilee year. Right. So in other words, in these big cities, in these walled cities, they weren't big cities by modern standards. The size of Jerusalem, I think. Oh boy, I guess there are different depending on who you ask. There are different amounts, but I think the amount they usually give for Jerusalem was a population of 10,000 or 5,000. Let me look it up for 1 second. Let's say in the time of David. Give me 1 second here. Did they say 3,000? It was either 3,000 or 10,000. I'm just going to look it up. What was the population of, and there are different scholarly opinions. There is the minimalist school, the maximalist school, the Tel Aviv school, the Jerusalem school. I won't even get into it. Of biblical archaeology, or Mikra, of Torah studies, or biblical studies. So, what was the population of Jerusalem during the time of David? Let's see what we got here. Population around. So again, they're saying here 1,000 to 2,000. It's a study published in Biblical Archaeology Society, which is pretty reliable. At any rate, there are different numbers that are given. I've seen different numbers between that. So we'll say 3,000, I think was the number I remember seeing the most. I could be wrong about that. At any rate, so that's what a city was that's what a walled city was in those days. It had a couple of thousand people, right? We're not talking about, 25 million people like the metropolitan area of a city like New York or something like that. Okay, but still, the rules were different here. Okay, let's see if we can get a little commentary. So what do we got? We just translate. Our translation, I think, was pretty decent. And the house in the town that has a wall shall pass over irreversibly to its buyer. Let's get a little of Robert Alter's commentary on that. In an agrarian economy, real property in open fields was a permanent and indispensable source of livelihood, whereas urban real estate was primarily a residence rather than a source of income. As a result, it was not regarded as inalienable property and might be permanently relinquished if the seller could not scrape together the funds to buy it back within a year. Okay. If we had more time, I'd go look up Ibn Ezra. I really want to get back to Ibn Ezra, who's a very good commentator. Okay. Right. Okay. So, just one thing for myself here. So we're going to look at this word chatzer, which they translate as a village or settlement. I just want to see one thing for myself. Okay. So a second. One second here. One second. Okay. Just want to see for myself what the BDB had to say about this word as it relates to what it's usually understood as, which is the unwalled cities. So, in the villages, so houses in the villages, אשר אין להם חומה סביב, על שדה הארץ יתחשב. So houses in the villages that don't have a wall around them, on shdei haaretz yachashev have the same, are to be reckoned as if they are in the open field. In other words, what the Torah is saying here in verse 31 is, if we're in a smaller town, we can't even call it a city. So the major cities in ancient times, any major city, any important city, any large city would have had a wall around it. There are many cities to this day that still have walls around them. Jerusalem is one of them. If you visit Jerusalem, I hope you all will. If you haven't already, you will see that there is a wall around Jerusalem. Now, that wall was built by the Turks, the same Turks that we mentioned. It was built by Suleiman the Great in the mid-1500s, and that is the wall that you will see if you visit Jerusalem. However, there have been other parts of earlier walls around Jerusalem that have been excavated, and if you ever come to Jerusalem, I would love to show you around and show you some of these ancient walls. There's some amazing ones, for instance, in the Jewish quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem. The Old City of Jerusalem refers to the part of Jerusalem that is within the current walls. In other words, the walls that were built by the Turks, the Ottomans in the 1500s. And the Old City of Jerusalem is divided into 4 quarters. the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter. And does anybody know what the fourth quarter is? Let's see how good you guys are. Anybody know the fourth quarter of the old city of Jerusalem? The Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, and the, anybody? Going once, going twice, type it in if you know. The Armenian quarter. There's a very small quarter right near the Jewish quarter called the Armenian quarter. And this comes from Armenians that fled the Armenian genocide carried out by the Turks. So the Turks were in possession of Israel during the quote-unquote Armenian genocide, and Armenia was part of, or should I say, Jerusalem was part of the Ottoman Empire, and so the Armenians fled. Some Armenians fled to Jerusalem and set up a small quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. It's known to this day as the Armenian quarter. Unfortunately, Armenians tend to not be very friendly towards the Jewish cause. They tend to side more with the Arabs, with the Muslims, in our ongoing conflicts with the Arabs in this area. Okay, neither here nor there. What was I going to say? Yes, I'm sorry. I was talking about some of the older walls, so I'll just give two examples. So in the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem, there's something called the Broad Wall, or Hezekiah's Wall. If we had time, a little bit more time today, I wanted to go through something called the King Hezekiah Bulla, which was a stamp from the time of King Hezekiah. Oh, shoot. I gotta do something to go take care of something before I forget. Guys, I'm going to have to be back in just a second. I'm sorry, but let me just give me a minute or two just to come back. Okay, I'll just leave this on the screen and I will All right, everyone. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of a interesting little mini crisis here. Let me get rid of these banners. I'm really sorry. So let me tell you guys what happened, because it's actually kind of interesting. So let's take a trip over to Leviticus chapter 11. Let's see if we can have Leviticus 11 come up. And I will tell you exactly what was going on. So we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 11. It'll come up. There it is. Let's make sure you guys can see it, and you can. So Leviticus chapter 11 is a list of unclean, or quote unquote, quote, unkosher animals. And let me see if I can find it here for a second. Right there. So we'll start in verse 4. This is Leviticus chapter 11, verse 4. But you should not eat these. Mi ma'ale hagera u mi farse aparsa. So you should not eat these from among those, or from among the animals that ma'ale gera, that are ruminants that chew their cud. Mafrise aparsa, and that have split hooves. Okay, and that gives a list of animals that you should not eat. The gamal ki ma'ale gerahu uparsa ena ufarsa enenu et mafris. So the camel you're not supposed to eat because it chews its cud. Chews its cud means it has multiple stomachs. Like a cow regurgitates it. One stomach will partially digest and will regurgitate into the second stomach, then the third, and then the fourth. I don't know how many stomachs a cow has, like a camel has, but multiple stomachs is the idea. So it chews its cud, but it does not have split hooves. Tamehu, it's unclean for you. It's unacceptable for you to eat. Tamehu lechem. Verse 5, et ha-shofan ki ma'ale gerahu u farsa lo yafris. Tamehu lachem. And the shafan, we'll talk about this animal right here in a second, because it also chews its cud, but does not have split hooves. It is unacceptable, is impure for you to eat, unclean for you to eat. Okay, so what is this word shafan? So shafan is translated here as the coney. That's a poor translation. It's really this guy right here. I'm going to show you. It's an animal called the hyrax. These guys right here. Can you see them? So they're all over the Golan Heights. And let's see if we can get even a better picture. Sometimes called also the rock badger. There's one of them right now. There's one. There's a picture of one. There's a picture of one. They're kind of cute and they're really kind of harmless. But I heard my cats going a little bit crazy, and I walked into my bedroom, and there was a hyrax, one of these guys here, sitting on my desk. And it was terrified, as you can imagine. So yeah. And both of my cats came into my bedroom, and they were trying to chase it away. And I said, this is the potential for a real mess to happen. So I kicked both of my cats out of the bedroom, and then I slowly moved furniture around to kind of force it out. And then I kind of very gently prodded it with a broomstick. And then eventually it got the idea. I left one door open for it to run out of. And after about 15 minutes, it got the idea and ran away. So that is what was going on. It did leave a little present behind, if you know what I mean. A little brown round present. Which I had to take about another couple minutes to clean up. But that is what was going on. So isn't that interesting? So we have here in Leviticus 11 we have this animal, the shafan. I'll tell you something very interesting also. A shafan. So the word Spain is related to the word shafan. As an aside, and it's very interesting. So the word Spain comes from the word Hispania. Anyone who speaks Spanish is familiar with that word, Hispanic, right? Hispania was the original name of the Roman province of Spain. It was Hispania. That's where Spain gets its name. Now, yeah, Ushpazin, exactly. And not even on Sukkot. And so many linguists or I guess historians believe that the word so the province of Hispania before it was taken over by the Romans was occupied by the Carthaginians. I visited Carthage in 2018. It's now in modern day Tunis and Tunisia. Really fascinating place. If you ever get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. Really nice, interesting place. So Carthage, I'd have to remember exactly what century, but I think about starting in around the 5th century BCE. And so it was destroyed by the Romans in what's called the Punic Wars. Punic coming from the word Phoenician. We spoke about the word Phoenician. Tyre, let's see how it all kind of comes back on itself. Tyre, which we saw in Zechariah chapter 10, was one of the 3 main Phoenician cities. And Phoenician is related to the word Punic. Carthage was it was a satellite. It was a colony of Tyre. My knowledge may be a little bit rusty, but it's been already 8 years since I've been there. Hard to believe, but this is the best of my recollection. So Carthage was a colony of Tyre, the Phoenician city, and the word Phoenician in Latin is something like Punicus or something like that. Phoenician, Punicus, right? And so the Punic Wars were 3 wars that the Romans fought with the Carthaginians. Carthage was the major power at the time before the Romans rose to prominence, and essentially the Romans won all 3 wars. And in the Third Punic War, they basically sacked Carthage and razed it to the ground. And if you go to modern day Tunis and you look at the ruins of Carthage, you won't even believe that this was essentially the major for a number of hundreds of years was the major city in the Mediterranean. It is just a couple foundations left, and that's about all. And of course, maybe you guys have heard of Hannibal. So Hannibal famously in I believe it's the Second Punic War. You can go fact check me on this again. I'd have to maybe a little bit rusty on the facts, so excuse me if I'm getting them not 100% right. But to the best of my recollection, the Second Punic War, Hannibal, the general of the Carthaginians of Carthage, brought elephants. He took elephants by sea to Spain, to Hispania. It wasn't called Hispania then. I'll tell you in a second what it was called and why the word shafan, this hyrax, this animal that invaded my personal space, my bedroom, is related to the word for Spain. At any rate, Hannibal took elephants. He transported them to the Iberian Peninsula, meaning to Spain, and then marched them to Italy. He marched them over the Pyrenees into France, and then through France, and then up into the Alps, up into the French Alps, into Italy, and then threatened to attack Rome. I don't think he actually reached, if I remember correctly, reached near Rome, but didn't reach Rome. But the idea was to scare the living, the the same thing that the hyrax left in my bedroom, to scare that out of the Romans by bringing the war home. And I think, if I remember correctly, the Romans, there was like a standoff for a couple of years, and eventually they were able to fight back Hannibal, And I think the Romans eventually, again, fact check me on this, I'm a little bit rusty on the facts, it's been a number of years, but the Romans were able to eventually fight back Hannibal. And I think they eventually defeated the Carthaginians in the Second Punic War. And then there was a Third Punic War, and that's when the Romans destroyed Carthage. Fascinating stuff. Okay, what does this have to do with this animal, the Shafan, the Hyrax that invaded my bedroom and was sitting on my desk when I walked in there? This guy. So we said that Spain comes from the name that comes from the name of the Roman province. The Romans gave the Iberian Peninsula, and you guys may know I lived in the Iberian Peninsula. I lived in Portugal for 4 years, from 2020 to 2024. Fascinating Jewish history and fascinating history in general of the Iberian Peninsula. But so Spain was the word Spain comes from the Roman or the Latin name of the province when it was owned by the Romans, which is Hispania. And Hispania comes from the Carthaginian word. So the Carthaginians spoke a dialect of Phoenician, because we said that Carthage was a colony of Tyre. Remember we spoke about Tyre. Let's bring up the map again. See if we can find it. History of map of ancient Israel, right? So we spoke about Tyre. Let's bring that up again. Okay. So here's the city of Tyre. It still exists to this day, and there's still ruins of ancient Tyre. Tyre was a Phoenician city. We also mentioned that Tyre, in earlier times, King Hiram of Tyre was allied with Solomon and David, and he provided the wood, the cedar wood from the cedars of Lebanon. Right? If you look at the flag of Lebanon to this day, you'll see it has it's on its flag is the picture of a cedar. That's the cedar of Lebanon. So Hiram, who was allied with David and Solomon, although it might have been two different Hirams, it might have been his son with Solomon. At any rate, shipped the wood that he had chopped from the mountains of Lebanon. These are the mountains of Lebanon here. Shipped them down to Jaffa, and then it was brought up to Jerusalem. This is spoken about explicitly in first book of Kings and the second book of Chronicles. So this same Tyre launched this colony. Let's bring up Google Maps. If I remember correctly, in the 8th century BCE. Right, so look at this. This is what is left of Carthage, which was the leading city in the Mediterranean for hundreds of years. That's it. I remember visiting this exact site. That's it. That's all that's left of the city, and a couple of other artifacts here and there. At any rate, let's go to maps. All right, how do we do this? Layers. It's taking this time to come up. So we want terrain, traffic. There we go. Okay. So that's Carthage. Let's zoom out a little bit. We're visiting all those places. So, okay, let's see. Where did Carthage go? So here's Carthage right here. This is modern day Tunis, or this is the center of Tunis. So this is in Tunisia. Let's zoom out. Okay. There's Sicily, there's Malta. And over here, let's see if we can get them both on the same, right? So here's Tyre over here. Here's Jerusalem over here. Look to the lower right-hand corner of the screen. There's Tyre right around there. And so the Tyrians established this colony here, around here, of Carthage. And so because the origin of the Carthaginians was Lebanon, was Tyre, they spoke a dialect. They spoke a Semitic dialect, which was very similar to Hebrew. And this was Phoenician. They spoke Phoenician. Okay, the Phoenician, by the way, Phoenician is the Greek name given to the people that we spoke about. The three main cities of the Phoenicians, Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. So they spoke a language very similar to Hebrew, West Semitic language called Phoenician. And so when they settled Carthage, the Carthaginians also spoke Phoenician. Okay. So much more to say about this. Phoenicians had to do with, we spoke about purple, which has to do with Techelet, the light blue of the tzitzits. It's a whole other story in and of itself. I don't want to get into it. But at any rate, so Carthage in, I can't remember the exact years, I'd have to look it up again, but I think starting about the 8th century BCE, grew to be the most important city of the Mediterranean. Here's Rome up here. And then the Romans eventually rose more and more, higher and higher in power. So eventually they defeated Carthage in the Third Punic War, as we said, the Third Phoenician War. At any rate, the Carthaginians ultimately settled in the Iberian Peninsula, took over Spain. And when they got there, they saw a whole bunch of these little animals. The same guy that I saw on my desk, the hyrax. Well, we said that the hyrax in Hebrew, close this out. The hyrax in Hebrew, as we see in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 5, is the shafan. Okay, shafan. And we also, if we look at the map, we see that Spain and Portugal form a peninsula. It's called the Iberian Peninsula, the Iber River. Okay, the Iberian Peninsula. But when the Carthaginians got there, they didn't know it was a peninsula because hadn't yet made it up, I guess, to the Pyrenees right over here. These are the Pyrenees. I've been up in the Pyrenees. They're very beautiful. And so they thought it was an island. And the word for island in Hebrew and in Phoenician is E. And they, and when they got there, they saw a lot of these hyraxes, which we said in Hebrew and also in Phoenician is shafan. So they called this place, they called the Iberian Peninsula the island of the shafan. The island of the shafan. Shafan in plural is shafanim. So in Hebrew or in Phoenician, I don't know exactly what it would be in Phoenician, but basically the same as in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it would be Ishfanim, the island of the hyraxes. Ishfanim, the same or very similar in Phoenician, and that became distorted later on, or that warped into or evolved into Ishfanim, became Hispania. So Hispania means the island of the Shafanim, the island of the hyraxes. And Hispania eventually gave its name to the country Spain. Eventually got its name from the Latin word Hispania, or the Latin name Hispania. And so therefore, Spain, or the Iberian Peninsula, Hispania, Spain, is linked to this word right here in Leviticus 11, which is linked to this little creature right here that I saw standing on my desk when I walked into my bedroom. Really fascinating stuff, if you ask me. Okay, so it's getting late here. But I do want to push ahead a little bit more. Let's go back to Leviticus 25, and let's at least finish off this section. So we were in verse 31. Any questions, any comments so far, by the way? Hope you enjoyed that little story. So Leviticus chapter 25, verse 31. So we saw vate ha serim asher en lahem choma. So in the villages that don't have a wall around them, lahem choma saviv, they're considered as if they are open fields in the land. In other words, well, it'll say exactly what. In other words, Gi'ula ti'yeh lo bayovel yitzeh. Okay, so there's a right of redemption, not just for the year. Remember, we said that any property that's in a walled city, the seller has 1 year to redeem it, to buy it back. But if it's not in a walled city, if it's in a small village, then it's as if then has the same law as we saw earlier for land inheritance, right? For basically farmland. Okay, so Gi'ulat Elo, so it has the right of redemption at any time, either by the person himself or by his next of kin or by his near of kin. And in the Jubilee year, in the ram's horn year, it goes out. In other words, it goes back to the owner. So we have three. To sum up what we're seeing here, in these verses is, if you have your land inheritance, right, your farmland that is your inheritance as an Israelite, then if you become poor and you have to sell it, then that's only a temporary sale. It's essentially a lease. You can buy it back at any time. Your nearest of kin can buy it back at any time. And if you or your nearest of kin can't buy it back, then it comes back to you in the Jubilee year. Okay? That's the law for farmland. If it's in a walled city, then those laws don't apply. You have 1 year to buy it back, and if not, you lose it forever. But if it's in a small village that doesn't have a wall around it, in other words, any major city would have, in ancient times, would have had a wall around it. Smaller cities would not have had walls around them. So then it follows the same law as the farmland. Okay? You can buy it back at any time. Your nearest of kin or your near of kin can buy it back at any time. And if neither of you can do that before the Jubilee year, then it comes back to you in the Jubilee year. That's what this verse is saying. Okay? Really fascinating stuff, if you ask me. Let me leave this up in case we need it. Let me close this out. Get rid of Mr. Hyrax. And maybe we should get a little Robert Alter on this. We already read that. So let's go on. Let's just at least finish off this paragraph. Okay. We are halewiim, bakte are chuzatam, giulat olam ti'eh lalewiim. So what's going on here? So there is an exception to this rule in the cities. So the cities of the Levites, the houses in the cities of their inheritance, giulat olam, they have an eternal right. Ti'eh lalevim. The Levites have an eternal right of redemption. Okay, so why is this exception given to the Levites? The Levites don't have a land inheritance. We haven't gotten to it yet, but we're going to see explicitly that the Levites, they are not given land. If you look at the divisions of the 12 tribes of Israel, and people get very confused about the 12 tribes, okay? So divisions or land inheritance of the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is laid out in the book of Joshua. Okay, so let's take this picture right here. No, how about this one? Okay. Link a new tab. Or open image, a new tab. Open image, a new tab. Okay, if you look, here are 12 tribes, but you're not going to see Levi anywhere, right? Because Levi was scattered. Levi became the priests, the Kohanim, and the assistants to the priests, the tribe of Levi. They don't have a land inheritance. Instead, they're given cities. And this is laid out later on. We're going to get to it eventually. They're given cities rather than a land inheritance. Okay, yet there are 12 tribes. How do you count for the 12 tribes? Well, Manasseh and Ephraim become two tribes in and of themselves. We saw this at the end of Genesis, where Jacob, on his deathbed, lays his hand on the heads of Ephraim and Manasseh, and tells Joseph that they shall be to me as, I think it says Reuven and Shimon. It shall be like sons. In other words, they're going to be tribes just like my other sons. So Joseph basically is split up into two tribes. He gets a double inheritance sign, another sign that Jacob saw him as the firstborn, because the firstborn gets a double inheritance. And this is why we still have the number when the count is, it depends on which count you're talking about. When we talk about the land inheritance, there are 12 tribes, but there's no Levi. There's just two. Joseph is just doubled to Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, so Levi is different. Because Levi doesn't have a land inheritance, the only thing they have are what's called the Levitical cities. And therefore, that's their only possession in the land of Israel. They have these cities that are given to them, 6 cities. And so therefore, they have the right. So the exception is with the Levites, since they have no other land in Israel besides the 6 Levitical cities. then, and it's eventually expanded. But besides 6 Levitical cities, they are given exception. They have the right. They don't follow the laws, or they don't. The Levites are not subject to the law that we saw for the walled city, where you have only 1 year to buy the property back. The Levites can buy their property back at any time. Okay, because that's their only possession, and that's what this is saying in verse 32. And does Robert alter? I'm surprised he doesn't have a comment on that. And he doesn't. I'm not sure why, but okay, let's go on a little bit more. Okay, verse 33. Where were we? Want to be in the Hebrew. Asher yig'al min haleviim, and that which shall redeem from the Levites, yetza mimkar bayit ve'ir achuzato b'yovel. So we gotta try to get a good translation of this since Robert alters. And what is redeemed of the Levites, the sale of house and the town of his holding, shall be released in the Jubilee. And let's go back to the Hebrew here. Ki batei arei haleviim hi achuzatam b'toch bnei Yisrael. So why is this the case? Because the houses of the cities of the Levites, the houses of the Levitical cities, achuzatam, this is their inheritance among the children of Israel. In other words, all they have are these cities. Okay, just what we said. This is just kind of reiterating that. I just want to see one thing here. It's kind of awkward in the Hebrew, so I just want to see how different translators are dealing with it. Okay. Verse 34. Ustei migrash arehem lo yemaker. Ki ahuzat olam hu lahem. And the fields, the fields of the that are surrounding the city. So the Levitical cities, will get eventually to Levitical cities. They have the city, and then they're given farmland around those Levitical cities. Okay. So the fields that surround their cities, lo yemaker, is not to be sold at all. Because rather it is an eternal inheritance for them. In other words, this is the only farmland in the ancient times. So the Levites and the Kohanim relied on tithes and eating from the parts of the sacrifices of the offerings that are brought by the rest of Israel. But the only farmland they have are these areas around the cities. Maybe next week we'll jump and look at one second here. Just one simple thing. Right. So these open areas, these fields that surround the cities, that's the only farmland they have, and so that it's never to be sold. Okay, it cannot be sold at all. Because it is their eternal possession or their eternal inheritance for them. Okay, I think that's as far as we're going to get today. See if there's any commentary. No. think we're going to end here. It's been a long study, but it's been a good one. Any questions, any comments before we end it for today? Any questions or any comments? If not, then I am going to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you happen to be in the world. Hope you enjoyed the study. And I've been posting on both YouTube channels and other places. I've been posting a lot of short form videos, shorts they call them, like 3-minute videos. I've gone with a good friend of mine named Ellie. We've visited a bunch of places and we've done some short form videos. We've also started doing podcasts, so you can check those out on both channels as well under the podcasts playlist. And yeah, that's about all I got for today. So thank you for joining us here. Hope you enjoyed the study. Sorry for the interruptions, but don't blame me, blame the hierarchs. And we'll go out with some music as always. So I wish you all Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov and a good week. Peaceful Shabbat and a good week. All right. Get some music up.
Many nights we've prayed with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hopeful song we barely understood. Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. The hope is rare, it's hard to cure. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you believe. This time of fear, when prayer so often proved in vain, hope seemed like a summer bird too swiftly flown away. Yet now I'm standing here with heart so full I can't explain, seeking faith and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is rare, it's hard to cure. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you believe. To laisse sa